So there's some background here on your handouts. I know there's a lot there. We'll just go through it quickly. There's some background to chapter 2. Israel has been here many times. 40 years earlier, Moses, remember, he had sent 12 spies into the nation of Canaan, and those 12 spies brought a report back. How many of them were afraid? 10. And the other 2 were they were ready to go. Do you remember who the 2 were that said, let's go? Joshua and Caleb. So Joshua is one of these spies. And so this is in their mindset as they are going into to Jericho. And when Moses sent the 12 spies into Jericho, it turned out to be a disaster, because the issue was not the giants in the land. The issue was that they were unwilling to trust God. They were unwilling to obey God. And so here we are now, we're 40 years later, and we're going to read in Joshua 2, he's sending in more spies. All right, but he's not sending 12 this time, he's only sending 2. And perhaps Joshua has learned a lesson that God is more able to be trusted than men. And so he's not concerned about sending all these spies back in, because he knows he can trust God. All right, so let's read this. I know it's 24 verses, but we need to read it, and then we'll make some comments. Joshua the son of Nun sent 2 men secretly from Shittim as spies, and saying, "Go and view the land, especially Jericho." Why? Why would he say Jericho? Big city, biggest there, the most fortified city in all the land. So they went, and they came into the house of a prostitute whose name was Rahab, and they lodged there. And it was told to the king of Jericho, "Behold, men of Israel have come here tonight to search out the land." And so the king of Jericho sent to Rahab and said, "Bring out the men who have come to you, who've entered your house, for they've come to search out all the land." But the women had taken the 2 men and hid them, and said, "It's true that the men came to me, but I didn't know where they were from. And when the gate was about to be closed at dark, they went out, and I do not know where the men went. Pursue them quickly, for you will overtake them." But she had brought them up to the roof, and she hid them with the stalks of flax that she had laid in order on the roof. So stop right there. So Rahab lied. Right? She lied. Okay, verse 7. So the men pursued after them on the way to Jordan as far as the fords, and the gate was shut as soon as the pursuers had gone out. Before the men lay down, she came up to them on the roof and said, "I know that the Lord has given you the land, and that the fear of you has fallen upon us, and that all the inhabitants of the land melt away before you. For we have heard how the Lord dried up the water of the Red Sea before you when you came out of Egypt. We have heard what you did to the 2 kings of the Amorites, who are beyond the Jordan, to Sihon and Og, whom you devoted to destruction. And as soon as we heard it, our hearts melted, and there was no spirit left in any man because of you. For the Lord your God, He is God in the heavens above and on the earth beneath. Now then, please swear to me by the Lord, that as I have dealt kindly with you, you also will deal kindly with my father's house, and that you will give me a sign, that you will save alive my father and mother, my brothers and sisters, and all who belong to them, and that you will deliver our lives from death." And the men said to her, "Our life or yours, even to death. If you do not tell this business of ours, then when the Lord gives us the land, we will deal kindly and faithfully with you." So then she led them down by a rope through the house, for her house was built into the city wall, so that she lived in the wall. And she said to them, "Go into the hills, or the pursuers will encounter you. Hide there 3 days until they have returned. Then afterward you may go your way." And the men said to her, "We will be guiltless with respect to this oath of yours that you made us swear. Behold, when we come into the land, you shall tie this scarlet cord in the window, through which you let us down. You'll gather into your house your father, mother, brothers, all your father's household. Then if anyone goes out of the doors of your house into the street, his blood shall be on his own head, and we shall be guiltless. But if a hand is laid on anyone who is with you in the house, his blood will be on our head. But if you tell this business of ours, then we shall be guiltless with respect to your oath that you've made us swear. And she said, according to your word, so be it. So she sent them away. They departed. She tied the scarlet cord in the window. They left. They went into the hills. They remained there 3 days until the pursuers returned. They searched all along the way. They found nothing. And then the 2 men returned. They came down from the hills. They passed over and came to Joshua the son of Nun. And they told him all that had happened to them. And they said to Joshua, truly, the Lord has given all the land into our hands. And also all the inhabitants of the land melt away because of us. All right, so let's look at a couple things tonight. The first one is a visit with a prostitute. That's where it starts. All right, we read here how they go in and into the house of a prostitute. And maybe we read this and go, why her? What, is there anything significant about Rahab? Well, she's mentioned by name, and of course there is something very significant about her. And there's a couple of questions that we want to ask. Was there anything here to suggest any wrongdoing with Rahab by these 2 men? No. We look at this and think, they were in a prostitute's house. Well, there's nothing wrong about what they were doing here. But then let's ask this question: why might it have been strategic to enter the city through a prostitute's house? Nobody would pay attention. Nobody would think anything about it. Right? She lived on the wall. Yep. So kind of smart. And I answered that they would be unnoticed going into the city with other men. Nobody would pay attention to that. So a smart decision to go in and go into the city this way. And I think one of the most surprising things, I know we probably, most of us know this story, but one of the most surprising things about this is that the spies go in and they find Rahab, and there's this connection made with her. They hear a confession of faith from a Gentile prostitute in the land of Canaan. They were not expecting that. They were not expecting that they would find this woman here that knew so much about God, that knew so much about who He was. And I think I put this on your handouts. In verses 9 through 14, list the following things that Rahab believed about God. Look through there and just take a minute and read through those verses again, 9 through 14, and just write out the spies didn't tell Rahab. Rahab already knew. What did she already know about God? Just take a minute and write some of those things in. Oh, it brings me great joy to see so many people writing. I love it. All right, I know y'all still working through that. Let's identify some of those. What are they? What did Rahab believe about God? All right, these are, I think I put 6 blanks there, but these are some of the things that I put down here. She believed in God's sovereign rule. All right, y'all said that already in verse 9. She believed in God's supremacy over other gods. Okay, she knew that already. Verse 11. She believed in God's judgment and she feared Him. We said that already. She believed in God's mighty power, and she talks about the Red Sea and the 2 Amorite kings. And then the last one I put is she believed in God's salvation. If I will do this, God will be merciful and kind to me. God will save me. If I do these 2. What's that? Yep, that's right. Yep.
She was brave to take them in anyway.
Yes.
The king found out about it. So
that's right. And
the guys were watching.
Yeah. I mean, and I pointed this out as we were reading through that. She lied. Is there ever a good or right time to lie? Okay, Gary, why don't you share with us what those are?
We're doing 65 and 45, sir. What?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
What about bringing Bibles into a country illegally?
Wow. Wow. Yep. Yep. Can you think of, I don't want to camp out here too long. Can you think of other examples in the Bible when God commended people for lying? He blessed them for lying. I can think, okay, that's a good perspective. Like, what is the greater good? There's an example in the Old Testament, and there's one in modern times that I think about. When Charlie, help me out. We were talking about this the other day. I think the Hebrew midwives, right? They were commanded by Pharaoh to throw. It was the male. If they're male, throw them into the Nile River to be eaten by crocodiles. And the Hebrew midwives lied. I think it's kind of funny the way they lied. They were like, "Hey, Mr. Pharaoh, these Hebrew women, boy, they're really good at giving birth. We can't keep up with them. By the time we get to them, the baby's already here." Of course, they were lying in order to preserve life. I think about that. I think about, and I know we've got to be careful with this because we can justify. We don't want to ever justify something sinful. But I think about Corrie ten Boom. Y'all remember her story with the Holocaust and World War II? She hid how many Jews in her home? And when the Nazis came and said, "Do you have any Jews here?" She lied. Okay? So, there are occasions, please nobody go home and put on social media tonight. Pastor Andy said there are times when we need to lie. Yeah. But yeah, here is just an example of and I think Romans 13 bears this out. There are moments, and they may be rare moments, but there are moments when civil disobedience is a good thing and a right thing. If our country were to pass a law that says it is illegal to worship Jesus, we would be disobeying that law. We would be disobeying the civil law of the land. And we would do that because it's at odds with what the Scriptures teach. All right. So yeah, these are things. There may be some other things but this is the surprise of Jericho. That God is at work in the house of a prostitute, in this city where Joshua is going in. All right. So that's the first thing. The second thing, we're going to look at this sneaky escape. All right. They get let down out of the window, and they are able to get away from the king of Jericho. Now here's what I love about what we're seeing here is that the spies meeting Rahab was not accidental. This is not random. This is God at work. Obviously, prostitutes are not normally praised for their actions, but this woman was. Matthew chapter 1, verses 5 and 6, we see the genealogy of Jesus, Salmon, the father of Boaz, by Rahab. Boaz, the father of Obed, by Ruth. Obed, the father of Jesse. Jesse, the father of David, the king. And of course, you flesh that on out. You get to the end of Matthew 1, and it's the king. And as the lineage of Jesus that this woman was a part of. Hebrews 11:31, by faith, Rahab the prostitute did not perish with those who were disobedient because she had given a friendly welcome to the spies. So the Faith Hall of Fame, Hebrews chapter 11, all right, the who's who of faith. This woman was a part of that and named in that. We know back in Genesis chapter 22, when God came to Abraham, God gave Abraham this promise that in your offspring, your descendants, All the nations of the earth are going to be blessed. Rahab was a Gentile, but by faith she became an offspring of Abraham. And we see this in Romans chapter 4, verse 16. She became one of the descendants of the Abrahamic covenant that God promised back in Genesis 12 and Genesis 22. All right? So were all of God's people in the Old Testament Israelites? No. But God was reaching out to some Gentiles, those outside of the nation of Israel. So, because Rahab became an offspring, a descendant of Abraham, she also enjoyed the promises and the blessings of that as well. And I just love this chapter because this is the way God works. God doesn't change. Like I'm so encouraged each and every day knowing that I may change or the world around me may change. But God never does. God is the same every single day. He doesn't change. And this is the way He works in salvation. That the first convert of Canaan was a Gentile who was marked for judgment. She was going to be judged along with everybody else there in Jericho. But instead, God provided a way of salvation for her. And she was saved and later came to be part of the genealogy of Christ. So I love that we're seeing salvation already here in Joshua. All right, and so the next thing we want to look at is making the connection. Rahab's story shows us the beautiful and complementary relationship between faith and works. What's this all about? Well, this is not just historical. It's great to know this, right? We don't want to just gain information. Like, what are some of the lessons here? What are some of the things that God's teaching us in here? The complementary relationship. These two things work together. I don't know how many people y'all have talked to over the course of your life, but this is one of the most common things that I hear in talking with people is, are we saved by faith or are we saved by works? Because the Bible seems to contradict itself. Because you got on one hand Paul saying in Ephesians 2 that you are saved by grace through faith and not of works. But then you go and you read James chapter 2 and he says that you must, it is by your works that you are saved. And so we look at that and go, those two things don't mesh, right? They're bumping up against one another. And really it's the same. A great way to think about this teaching is the two sides of the same coin. Paul is looking at salvation from this viewpoint, and James is looking at it from the other viewpoint. They're looking at the same issue, and they complement one another. Again, Hebrews 11:31. We just read that she gave a friendly welcome to the spies, and that she was saved because of her faith. James actually talks about Rahab in James chapter 2, verse 25. He mentions this and brings this up. Where he says, was not also Rahab the prostitute justified by works when she received the messengers and sent them out by another way? So you've got 1,000 years later, James is still talking about the works of Rahab, and he's using that to illustrate the relationship between faith and works. So what we see here is this, that her actions in Jericho were just simply outward evidence of her faith. She was not saved by her works. Her works did not save her. Her faith saved her. What we just went through. What does she believe about God? She believed, and Paul brings this out in Romans chapter 4, that just as Abraham, in fact, let me just read that to you. Romans chapter 4. That's so important, I think, to understand this relationship. Romans chapter 4, look at, let me just read verse 1. What then shall we say was gained by Abraham, our forefather, according to the flesh? If Abraham was justified by works, he has something to boast about, but not before God. For what does the Scripture say? Abraham believed God, and then it was counted to him as righteousness. To the one who works, his wages are not counted as a gift, but as his due. And the one who does not work, but believes in him who justifies the ungodly, his faith is counted as righteousness. You go down to verse 16. This is why it depends on faith, in order that the promise may rest on grace and be guaranteed to all of Abraham's offspring, not only to those who keep the law, but also to the ones who share the faith of Abraham. So Rahab was not saved because she did something good. She believed in God, and it was her faith that saved her, but then her faith was proven by what she did after that. The works that she did with helping the spies, getting them out of the city, and believing in God. So the two spies, they were very careful to say, look, if you will do what we command you to do, you will be saved. But if you go beyond that, if anybody that's not in your house, if anybody leaves your house and they die, their blood is going to be, on your hands. So her action of tying that scarlet cord on that window, that was her demonstration of I am putting my faith and trust in the God of Israel. She didn't know anything about Jesus. She didn't know anything about Messiah. She just believed God. And that's the same way that sometimes we think, well, how do these Old Testament people get saved? How do we know they're in heaven if there was no Jesus? How did people in the Old Testament get saved before Jesus? Okay, faith. The same way we get saved. It's not any different. I mean, we do have the cross, we do have Christ, we do have His demonstration, but the Old Testament believers, there in Romans 4, they just believed God. And their faith was counted as righteousness. All right? They believe the same way we believe. So, and I think I put those on there. Romans 4, 1 through 5, James 2, 21. Salvation always comes to sinners by faith, and faith always produces good works. We get in trouble. Sometimes we get scolded by people that you shouldn't judge me. You shouldn't judge the way I live. The people that don't want to have anything to do with Christianity, or people that don't want to come to church because they say, well, all they do, they just judge you and, point out all of these things. And I remember somebody a long time ago, somebody saying, I'm not a judge, I'm a fruit inspector. The scriptures tell us, and Jesus says, you will know whether or not people have faith by their fruit, by the way that they act. And even then, we don't go around and say, well, you're not a believer and you are a believer. We understand that. But saving faith always produces good works. What are some of the good works that saving faith produces? Love. Okay. What else? Somebody said something else? Okay, I'm glad you brought that up. What are there? There are 9 of them. Those are the good works. The fruit of the Spirit. Loving people when you don't want to love them. Forgiving people that don't deserve to be forgiven. Being kind to people that you would rather not be kind to. Yes, sir.
Well, by the same token, we better hope that all these people that work really hard around here are doing it because of their faith and not doing work so that they get into heaven.
Sure. I mean, and that's a legitimate concern. How many, and I hope there's nobody here in our church that thinks, let me go to church so I can go to heaven. Let me give some money so I can go to heaven. Let me serve on a committee so I can go to heaven. Let me preach. Let me sing. Let me serve. Let me do all these things so I can go to heaven. That's not the way to gain heaven. And while that might not be here, you might be shocked at how many people are filling up our churches across our country that do think that way. And we know that for a fact because in Matthew chapter 7, Jesus says people are going to stand before him and go, hey, wait a minute. I did this, I did that, I helped that, I did all of these things. All right? And I think that's the most frightening verse in all of the Bible, I think, is that scene where people are convinced they know Jesus. And they get there and it's too late. All right? So salvation always comes to sinners by faith. Faith always produces good works. So let's look at this last thing. Let's look at this gospel glimpse. And we just sort of see the gospel at work in Joshua chapter 2. Man, I love this right here. God is able to save anyone at any time from anything. All right? That's Rahab. That's Rahab's testimony. When you get to heaven and you find Rahab, I guarantee you she'll say, let me tell you my testimony. God is able to save anybody at any time from anything because He did that in my life. That's kind of my testimony as well. So that person in your life tonight, whether it's in your family, a coworker, a friend, somebody, that person that you think is just too far gone, they're not. That person that you think is just too messed up, they're not. That person that you think, this is the last person I would ever expect to give their life to Christ. You should not think that way. Because God is able to save anybody at any time from anything. If He can do that for Rahab, He can do that certainly for anybody. I love thinking this way. Do we see people in the way that they have been? Right? Do we see people see who people have been? Or do we see people for who they could be? How do we view the people around us? Y'all like people watching? I like to watch people. All right. Sometimes I get accused of being creepy, or like I'm stalking. I like to people watch. All right. When I get a chance to, I like to people watch. I just watch people. All right. And yes, sir. Says. Amen. Old things have passed away. That's right. That's certainly true about Rahab. So when I watch people, especially when I'm in a car at a stoplight, and people are turning and they're coming right by me, like that. I love watching those people. I just look at all of them. And sometimes they look at me like, who in the world? Every single one of those people are going to be in eternity one day. All right? Do we see who people used to be? Or do we see people for who they could be? All right. God is able to save anybody, anytime, from anything. For everyone who calls on the name of the Lord shall be saved. All right. What other observations? Any questions about chapter 2? Anybody want to mention anything before we go?
I would say she didn't continue to be a prostitute because she married Salmon.
All right. There you go. That's right. So another example of fruit, of good works. Yep, when the city was destroyed, everything was destroyed except her house. But she didn't go back to that old life because she married the father of Boaz. Yep, good. All right, so next week you have a rather lengthy assignment to read, okay? So I know that's a chunk. It's not that much. You might be looking at that going, that's 2.5 chapters. It's not that much. So take some time over the next 7 days and read this next section. Familiarize yourself with it. There's going to be some awesome things that are going to happen in Canaan, and there's going to be some hard things that happen as well. So, all right, let me pray for us. Lord, thank you.